Hello and welcome back to the Google Workspace Update podcast from Strawberry 7. My name is Adam.
And my name is Adam.
We're here every week to give you the latest updates around Google Workspace. This podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Strawberry7. Let's get to it.
Coming up on the show today,
we have 7 updates for you today. We're starting off with a brief summary of completed rollouts of some previous updates that we've had on our recent episodes. Then we've got Google Docs and Slides. We've got Google Docs on its own. Then we've got Google Chat, Google Meet, Google Calendar, we think there's a bit more information on that later, and Google Workspace API, and then we are finishing off with Google Slides and Meet. Let's get to it.
On with the show. Right, so first up, we do have some updates that have now completed their rollout. We've got the easily format and display code in Google Docs. That update has now completed the rollout. For scheduled release, we've got full mouse support being available on Google Docs on the Android app. There's also the update where you could create drop-down chips in Google Sheets and also see collaborator avatars in the toolbar of apps on Android devices. And finally, for the rapid release and scheduled release, there was get enhanced spam protection through automatic labeling of suspected spam calls in Google Voice.
That's great. Thank you very much, Adam. Yeah, so if any of our lovely listeners are interested in any of those updates that Adam has mentioned, they are in some previous episodes, and we're going to drop some notes in our podcast section which gives you some time indexes of the updates that we've got coming up, and we'll also for this update drop the episode numbers for those little scheduled releases and rapid releases that Adam has just talked about there, so you can go back to those previous episodes and listen if you're interested in any of those updates. Thank you very much, Adam. What's our first main update that we got coming up?
Right, so this one is to do with Google Docs and Slides. So improvements to voice features in Google Docs and Slides. So I think this is quite a cool little fun update, actually. So Google is improving the feature that will enable you to type and edit by speaking in Google Docs or in Google Slides speaker notes. So it's a bit like a dictation, really. So presenter slides with automatic captions to display a speaker's words in real time. So these enhancements will help reduce transcription errors and minimize lost audio during transcription. The improvements also include expanded availability to most major browsers. Little caveats on that. I looked into this. By major browsers, it means Google Chrome and nobody else. Additionally, captions in slides will now contain automatically generated punctuation, so that's cool. Google hopes this launch leads to more inclusive and accessible user interactions within Docs and Slides.
Well, that absolutely, I can completely see that. That's a very, very useful feature for any people who are joining a slide or on a slide where they have, I assume, a auditory impairment, and will really, really help with. I suppose theoretically it could help with a visual impairment as well, if they've got some kind of, if they're looking at the transcription afterwards and they've got like one of those screen readers or something like that, could help them go back over that. But I think, mainly for those sort of auditory impairments where they're being able to see the text coming up on the screen as the speaker's talking about it. Very interesting. I tell you what it's reminded me of was an update a while ago where the transcription feature came onto Google Meet, so it would automatically transcribe what you were saying over Google Meet. We actually tried this a while ago when the update came out, didn't we? And it actually worked pretty well. It was quite amazing how accurately it transcribed what we were saying.
Yeah, that's right. I did have a look through that, and I thought for at least 90, maybe 95%, maybe even a little bit more if I'm being generous. It was quite accurate, yes. I'd be interested, the part about this that I find particularly interesting is when it says automatically generated punctuation. And so I do wonder, sometimes punctuation can be a little bit interpretive as to maybe when you're supposed to put a comma in or something like that. Maybe I use a little bit more punctuation than I'm supposed to, but I think I did notice in the transcription from Google Meet, I don't think there was too much punctuation going on in there, but a lot of the text that was actually there, it was quite accurate. So I was pleasantly surprised with that.
Yeah, that is very very good. No, I can see that this is a really interesting feature of how they're using that kind of instant transcribing there to bring that into Google Slides and Google Docs like that. Great. How do you sort of actually use that, Adam?
So to use the voice typing or voice commands on your computer, so you can also use it for commands as well, not just for voice typing. Your microphone needs to be on and working, which hopefully that's a bit of a given, but it does. Your microphone does need to be on and working. So then you would open a document in either Docs or Slides within your Chrome browser, click on Tools, and then Voice Typing. You should then see on screen a microphone box will appear. When you're ready to speak, then just click on that microphone, and then you should speak clearly at a normal volume and pace. Once you have finished, then click on the microphone again. And so this particular feature supports a plethora of languages. I had a look into that. Far too many to read out, but all the way from Afrikaans to Zulu, there's so many languages that this does support. So that's really, really good. And again, it'd be interesting to see how accurate the transcription is across all the different languages as well. Obviously, we're speaking English, but if you're speaking another language, then it would just be very interesting to see what that is like in reality. There's also many features that you can also use with the Google Voice, such as adding in punctuation, formatting your document, editing, and also inserting and modifying tables. So I had a bit of a play with this, and so for example, one of the commands that you can do is insert table. And if you just say insert a table, it will literally insert a table. But if you're speaking in a sentence and you say insert a table, it will also do that. So I was having a bit of a play and say, what? So I told my Google document, I walked into the room and I thought to myself, what do I need to do? Insert table. And then I wanted to see whether it'd put the word insert table or it'd physically insert the table. And I think because I was already just speaking a sentence, then it put the words insert table. But if I did it separately and said insert table, the table did appear. And so
wow.
Yeah, so I think that was quite good.
It's very clever.
Yeah, I was having a bit of a play with that. So what I have done, I've put a link that we've shared, that we've made available to everyone. So if you want a little bit more information on the various different voice commands and features that are available with this, you can have a look into that and get some more information that way.
That's great. Thank you, Adam. That's really, really helpful. When are we looking at sort of seeing this feature available? Looks like it might be available sort of now.
So the rapid release started on January the 9th and scheduled release started on February the 6th.
Great. Okay, that's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's available for everybody, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. This is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers, and it's also available to customers with a personal Google account. So we really like these accessibility features, essentially, that are just available to right across the board to absolutely everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next?
Up next is to do with Google Docs. So there's a new option to view non-printing characters in Google Docs. When I first read this update, I was kind of wondering, what does it actually mean by non-printing characters? So my very first thought was, oh, you're using like a quirky font or something like that. But then I realised, no, you actually can't install fonts in Google Docs. So it's not that. But hopefully what this actually is should become very clear. So when viewing or editing a Google Doc, non-printing characters such as line breaks, section breaks, tabs, and spaces are not visible. So from now, you can choose to display non-printing characters in order to see how the document is laid out. when turned on, you will see symbols or text to represent the following. So we've got paragraphs or hard breaks, lines and soft breaks, section breaks, page breaks, column breaks, tabs, and spaces. This feature provides a visual representation of what controls the formatting in a document, allowing you to make appropriate edits much easier.
Finally, Google have introduced this feature. This has been one of the biggest lacking features that I've noticed personally coming from when I came from Microsoft Word to Google Docs. This was one of the biggest things that was lacking. You're quite right, Adam. A lot of people are unaware of this feature existing in Word, let's say, or unaware of what this feature is, maybe don't use it. But if you do use it, or you have used it in the past, you realise what an absolute godsend it can be sometimes when you've got a document and it's doing something weird and you just can't figure out what's going on. Your cursor won't go in the right place, or a picture is formatted weirdly, or something like that. And what this feature allows you to do is just see, as you've described there, where those spaces are, or those section breaks or anything like that. You can get a much better idea of what's going on in the document. For anybody unfamiliar, this was available in Word as a little button that was kind of almost looked like a backwards P with sort of two lines, and you'd click that, and then all of these hidden characters would be available, and you could see what was going on in the document. Absolutely fantastic feature that's been lacking on Google Docs. So I'm very pleased to see this feature available. Please, Adam, tell me, how can I turn this on in my document?
I knew that you'd like this update, because I knew that you do use this feature yourself in word processing. And again, when I saw this feature came out, I was a bit surprised that I was like, is that not already a feature? But clearly not. And just for clarification, so you were just saying that in Word, it looks a bit like a backwards P. It will look exactly the same in Google Docs as well. So to get started with this, for the end users, to display non-printing characters in a doc, go to View, then Show Non-Printing Characters.
Wow, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? That's to the point. Yes. When am I going to be able to use this feature, Adam? When is it going to be available?
So rapid release started on January the 9th. Scheduled release is starting on January the 23rd. And this is also going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and business customers. And it's also going to be available to users with a personal Google account.
Right. That's very, very interesting. I tell you something which I know isn't in this update, but something that would be very interesting for us to test out. I wonder if I'm working on a document, say one of our SOPs, for example.
Yeah.
If I'm working on SOP and I enable non-printing characters, I wonder if that would be visible for you when you go into that document. I wonder if the setting is sort of a user thing, or whether it saves to the document itself. That would be quite, because I know in Word it saves to the document itself, but that makes sense because there's no, certainly traditionally with Word as a desktop application, there's no kind of user assignment. So I wonder how that would work in Google. We'll have to experiment with that a little bit and try that. But I'm just letting you know now, I'll probably turn that on for every document I encounter. So sorry if you notice a whole load of non-printable characters.
That's fine. It's definitely a useful feature. And I think you're quite right. I think you kind of mentioned some people, maybe they're just not familiar with this feature, or they've almost definitely seen the button in Word before, but maybe they just weren't sure what it's for. But you're quite right, especially when you're trying to work on it. It's always if you're trying to work on somebody else's document. Well, a lot of the time it's if you're working on someone else's document, you just do not know what formatting is going on somewhere within the document. So turning this on, it can just make things so much easier. It really is helpful. Once you start to become familiar with this feature, you'll probably use it a lot more frequently.
Yeah. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. The biggest place I use it is with tables. If there's any document with tables on, tables are a nightmare in Word anyway, much better in Google Docs. But certainly with using tables, this feature can really, really help understand why those tables are maybe breaking in a way that you're not expecting, or something like that. You know, you've got too many carriage returns in a cell, for example. You can't see that, right, if you don't have these hidden characters on. So very excited about that update, but I will stop talking about it now because because this is for the lovely listeners, not for me. So what's our next update then, Adam?
Up next, we've got an update to do with Google Chat. So introducing simpler conversation creation in Google Chat. So currently, when starting a new Google Chat conversation on the web, you are prompted to select Start Group Conversation by typing the name or names of who you'd like to chat with. Starting from now, the process to create conversations in chat will be much simpler by combining the flow for creating one-on-one conversations and group conversations. Google is removing the Start Group Conversation option and enabling you to create conversations with a desired number of recipients right away by simply typing the names of the recipients. So with this update, users can create chat conversations in one consistent and intuitive way, whether with one person or a group. Additional details will be no changes to the process for creating new spaces, browsing spaces, or sending messages to existing spaces.
Yeah, I think that's a very good improvement, actually, because it used to sort of confuse me a little bit when I first started using Google Chat, because you'd go in, and you're quite right, like you say, the first thing you'd see is it would say, what group do you want to talk to? And I think, I don't want to talk to a group, I just want to talk to Adam. So it wasn't the most intuitive thing to somebody coming into Google. Obviously, we worked out how to do it, and we use the sort of app. I'm saying that for our audio listeners. I'm saying that in inverted quotes. It's like, it's not really an app. It kind of is, but that it works in a slightly different way anyway. But I can see that this is an improvement for people coming in new, using the web version, and just wanting to speak to one person. I can see how that would make that clearer. How do people sort of get started with that then, Adam?
Okay, so for admins, there's no admin control for this feature, but for their end users, open Google Chat on the web, not the app, on the web, select New Chat, type the names or emails of the chat recipients from the suggestions shown, and then hit enter. Once you've included everyone you want in the conversation, click Start Chat or hit enter again. And just a tip for this: so to start a conversation with one person directly, you can click the Start Chat icon next to their name, or use the keyboard shortcut, which would be Command Enter on Mac or Control Enter on Windows, Linux, or Chrome OS.
Great, that's really useful information. Thank you, Adam. And when are we going to see that coming out?
So rapid release is starting on January the 11th, and scheduled release is starting on February the 3rd.
Great, and that's going to be available to everybody, I think, is that right?
Yes, that's right. So once again, just I think all of our updates so far today, this is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite, Basic and Business customers. This is also going to be available to users with a personal Google account.
Great, that's brilliant. And what have we got next, Adam?
Up next, we've got an update to do with Google Meet. So new in-meeting reactions for Google Meet. You can now use emojis to share in-meeting reactions in Google Meet on the web, Meet hardware devices, and iOS, with Android coming soon. So these reactions will show a small badge in the sender's video tile and floating up the left side of the screen. When there are multiple user engagements, you'll see a burst of emojis on the left of your screen. To share a reaction, select the smile icon or in the control bar to get the reaction bar. You can hover over this bar to select the skin tone of your choice, which will then be applied to all emojis subject to change color. So that's quite handy, actually. It sounds like you'd only have to change your skin tone for one emoji, and then it would apply them to all of them. So I think that would be quite handy, actually. In-meeting reactions provide a lightweight, non-disruptive way to engage and participate in meetings without interrupting the speaker. Further, this option, with options to select skin tones that best represent your identity, you can participate more authentically. So Google hopes this feature makes it easier for you, your colleagues, your stakeholders to stay better connected and engaged, whether you're working from home, the office, or anywhere in between.
Nice. I mean, it's kind of what we've seen a bit of a trend of these things that are very popular in social media, or things that you see in the social media apps kind of coming into these workplace apps. So I can understand how that would be, a nice engagement there, and to encourage people, especially for anybody who's speaking and they're not they're not comfortable in that environment. They're not comfortable presenting to a whole load of people, and they're a bit nervous about it, and they've got their script, and they kind of want to get through it, and they want to do that. You can give them that positive reinforcement without, as it says, any interruption to them, and it is just a nice reaction, So that's a nice sort of addition that they've put in there.
Something I'm a little bit curious about with this is how long will the emoji stay present? So, for example, if you've got an hour-long meeting and they start off with some good news or something right at the beginning and everyone gives a thumbs up or something like that, will that just stay there for the duration of the meeting, where maybe they move on to something that's less good news or something, but it would look as if people are still reacting to that same thing? So that's just one thought that I had about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say that probably what they've done is replicated, again, what the sort of social media platforms have done. And when you put your reaction, it will kind of float up the screen or do some sort of animation or something like that and disappear off the top of the screen.
Oh, I see. So it's not just something that will just stay there on screen indefinitely. It is more of a small animation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but that would be my sort of guess as to how that would work. How can people sort of get started with this? Because obviously, I can see there's some admin control on this, which is a good thing, especially in the education space, I should imagine.
Yes, so for the admins, reactions will be on by default, but they can be turned off in the admin console if you would like to turn them off. But for their end users, for meeting hosts, reactions will be on by default and can be turned off by the meeting host. So that's quite good. If you're hosting the meeting, you can just choose to turn it off for everybody if you would like to. But for the meeting participants, it will be available, but only if enabled by your admin or the meeting host.
Right, okay. So, yeah, I mean, my advice would be to anybody listening who's taking care of education institutions like we do, I would probably go in and turn that off. By default, for any of the education customers, we'll put an entry in our next team meeting, Adam, to actually make sure that we've turned that off, because I can imagine that being very disruptive in a sort of teaching meeting that's going on or something like that. So I would sort of advise...
Definitely, especially if you have a class full of students, which is typically 30 or so, then just imagine it all going off all over the screen all at the same time. It would be great fun for the students, but not really for the teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 500 poop emojis all over the screen constantly is not going to be fun for anybody. So and when can we see that rolling out so that the admins kind of know what time they've got to turn that off?
Okay, so rapid release for this is starting on January the 16th. Scheduled release is starting on January the 23rd, but if you're a user with a personal Google account, then the rollout for that started on January the 11th. So it looks like the personal users got theirs first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're a personal user, it's not so much of an impact, I suppose, and they're thinking with businesses, they are probably going to want to put some control on that, like I say, especially in education environments. So, again, if you're listening and you're taking care of education environments, you're probably not on rapid release, I would imagine. So, scheduled release 23rd of January. From the time that this podcast is going out, that probably gives you a few days to turn that off if you want to. So, I would probably make sure that you turn that off for your education clients. And that's going to be available right across the board, for Adam, for everybody, right?
Yes, that's right. So if you were wanting to turn this off, then it'll be a week after the release of this podcast. But yes, so this is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers. And as we've already mentioned, it's also going to be available for personal Google accounts too. So Adam, I fully expect in our next meeting or the following one, by the looks of it, every single update we expect a big thumbs up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll start using. We'll start playing about with that emoji feature in the team meetings, and yeah, see if what sort of emojis we can put in place. Great. What's our next update here, Adam? And we've got a bit of a caveat with this update, but I'll let you sort of explain that.
Thanks, Adam. Right, so this one we're saying it's to do with Google Calendar. We think so, but let's get into it, and then everyone can decide for themselves where this fits into Google Workspace. So. In this hybrid work environment, there's an increased need to better optimize meeting rooms in order to foster greater collaboration. Room Release, which is an existing feature that releases booked meeting rooms when all but one attendee declines the invitation, will now be on by default. This update improves the opportunity for admins and their colleagues to have better context for location planning, meeting room management, and attendee accommodations. There will be a transition period which will be running from January the 11th to March the 6th. So you've got 2 months or so for the transition period, where admins can opt out of structured meeting rooms or user groups for this room release setting. Now, over to you, Adam, for some more detail, please.
Yes, thank you, Adam. Yeah, Adam and I were trying to unpack this before the podcast and thinking about how we were going to present this to you. There is a huge amount of detail from Google, and we just decided amongst ourselves that it's just too complicated to go into and try and explain. It would kind of just go on for ages and be very, very complicated to try and understand. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to leave all of the detail in the document that we always link to. As Adam said earlier, we always link to the document that we read from in our podcast notes. But just to try and give you a bit of a summary as to what these details are about, from our understanding of it, at the moment, if you're using room resources, there's very granular control over each room as to how you can set this particular setting of how it's released, depending on whether people have accepted or declined the invitation. So at the moment, it seems to be that you can do it per room. After this update, it's going to just be one setting for all rooms. Either you can turn that feature on or you can turn it off, and it's just for all rooms across the domain. And this transition period seems to allow you to have the opportunity to gradually migrate that setting across. So if you do have it on for certain rooms and off for others, it allows you to kind of put those features across to the new setting somehow. Like I said, Google go into a lot more detail about how you can do that. So if that's relevant to you, I encourage you to have a look at the document that we've linked to and have a little bit look at more of those details if that's relevant to you. If you've got any questions as well, then you can always drop a line to us here at info@strawberry7.com and we'll do our best to help you with any specific questions. So I'll hand back over to you, Adam, for the next update.
Thanks, Adam. All right, next update is to do with Google Workspace API. So you can now manage all Google Workspace API activity from a single location. So within the Google Cloud Console, which is console.cloud.google.com for anyone that's not sure, you can now view and manage all Google Workspace API activity. From there, you'll find a centralized view in which APIs are currently running and their associated requests. You can also easily perform common actions such as monitoring aggregated metrics for APIs, including traffic errors and latency, viewing and adjusting quotas as needed, managing API credentials, finding other available APIs tutorials, and documentation. This unified experience will eliminate the need to search for APIs manually, making it easier to manage your existing projects and build out your API ecosystem with new integrations.
I can imagine this would be really useful for people who are using these APIs and especially using quite a few of them because we don't really use them in what we do, but I can imagine this being a nightmare to keep track of. Even just remembering what APIs you've got running and what you've got plugged in can sometimes get out of control. So having one place that you can go to and view all of this and see any of those errors, see anything that needs adjusting, is very, very useful. And like managing the API credentials from a security point of view, for example, would be, I can imagine, really, really useful. So I can definitely see how that's a really good update for people using those APIs. How do people get started with this, Adam? I mean, I presume it's just sort of going to the site, right?
So for the admins and developers, from the navigation menu in the Google Cloud console, navigate to View All Products. From there, go to Other Google Products, and then select Google Workspace.
Okay, excellent. And I think this is available now, is that right?
Yes, that's right. So literally all we've been told from Google, this feature is available right now. So happy days. If you're wanting to utilize this, it's available right now. I would also add that Google didn't actually specify who this feature is available to, but I'm just going to go out and say there, if you have access to the Google Cloud Console, which as I say is console.cloud.google.com, then you should have access to this update.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, they probably haven't put versions in here because I think it's a bit like Google Voice. It's sort of one of those things. APIs is kind of like an overarching thing. Google Voice is sort of a separate service, but APIs, I believe, kind of overarch in this sort of thing that sits almost above Google Workspace of Google Cloud. So I think that's probably why they haven't put who it's available for there. But you're quite right. If you can access that console area, you should be able to see it. What's our next update, Adam, which I think is our last update?
Yeah, so last update from us this week is Google Slides and Meet. So you can now view speaker notes while presenting Google Slides in Google Meet. So back in October of 2022, Google introduced the ability to present Google Slides directly within a Google Meet meeting, which we covered on this podcast. To build upon this, you can now view your speaker notes within Google Meet. Simply click the new speaker notes button in the slides control bar in Meet to display your speaker notes within the call. Present with greater confidence and engage with your audience without having to context switch between notes and slides. So I think this is going to be a really helpful update. I was actually surprised that it almost didn't come included already, to be honest.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, as I sometimes do with these updates where they get a little bit confusing about they're talking about one Google feature within another one, for anybody listening thinking you can't view speaker notes in Google Slides, this is specifically when you're presenting a Google slide but within Google Meet, right? We've had some updates before where we've talked about Google Chat, but it's been Google Chat within Google Meet, which is two sort of separate things. So this is similar. We're talking specifically about when you're presenting slides but you're already in Google Meet. I agree with you, Adam. I'm fairly surprised that this wasn't there to begin with, but again, Google
I wonder if that would have been because if you were presenting your slideshow to the whole meeting, then everybody within the meeting would have also been able to see your notes as well, whereas now it can be kept slightly separately, so then you can view your notes whilst you're still presenting your meeting to everybody else within the Google Meet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Absolutely, yeah. It's keeping it just with you seeing those slide notes. Sorry. Okay, and how do people get started with it? I think you've kind of alluded to that, how they click in the presentation, but how do people get started with this?
Okay, so there's no admin controls for this feature, but for their end users, whilst you're within your Google Meet, select the Present a tab in Meet, then choose a Google slide presentation, click on the speaker notes button in the controls at the bottom corner of the presentation, and then you should see that your notes should become available.
That's pretty straightforward. And when are we going to be able to use that feature?
So rapid release started on January the 10th, so that was a couple of days ago from the time of recording, and scheduled release is starting on January the 30th.
Excellent. And who I think the not available to is probably the shorter list. It's quite an even split, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go the other way and say,
Okay.
If I'm saying this is available to you, then you know that it is available to you. So this is going to be available to Google Workspace Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Essentials, Enterprise Standard, Education Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Plus, the Teaching and Learning Upgrade, and non-profit customers. So if I've not mentioned the licensing that you're using within your own Google Workspace, then this feature will not be available to you, which also includes personal Google accounts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're seeing one of these slightly more advanced features that isn't available on those entry level editions, basically, on those sort of starter editions and things like that. Again, interesting that it's going to only be available on the paid tiers of education as well. So it's just another thing that might be quite tempting for those schools to want to upgrade to a more advanced version of Google Workspace for their education environment to get things like this, access to speaker notes when they're doing presentations. That can be quite useful, I should imagine. Thank you very much, Adam. And that's it, everybody. That's everything that you need to know this week about the latest updates to Google Workspace. As I said at the start, this audio podcast is available from your regular podcast provider, and we are also available in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7. Thank you so much for listening this week.
And we'll be back again next Monday with more updates.
Goodbye.
Bye.